Okay, so this is video 2 or part 2 for the 4-bar assembly. In video number 1, I walked you through the steps of completing all the parts, the individual pieces, the long bar, the short bar, the base, the test block, and the connector, and putting those on the drawings. This video is now going to take all those parts and put them into an assembly. So starting back at my SolidWorks, or excuse me, my Schoology here under 2A, looking at my home page, I'm going to go in and expand out a folder that says 4-bar assembly. This time though, I want to create the 4-bar assembly PDF file. So I'm going to go ahead and left click on that. And then to make it full screen, I'm going to go ahead and hit the download button so I can get this to open in Adobe Acrobat. Expand this to full screen. And let's go ahead and briefly talk about what we're going to do here. So what I'm going to start now in SolidWorks is a new assembly. We just did this part 8C, so this is only our second assembly, so I'll go through the whole steps with you, so just in case you forgot. What I'm going to start with is in the assembly mode, I'm going to come in and start with the base first. And then I'll bring in my long bar, short bar, connector, and test block in subsequently, and then we'll go ahead and do the mate tool to get everything put together. When we're done, we'll go ahead and bring this drawing in here. Again, it's nothing more than the front, top, and right side view in the assemble mode. And then we'll bring in our two isometric views, one fully assembled, one exploded. We'll finish off by adding in our titles and our bill of materials with balloons. At this point though, now I'm going to go to SolidWorks and start a new assembly. So I'm going to go to File, New. Now remember, in SolidWorks templates, we do not have a starting point for our assemblies. So what I'm going to have to use is one of the subsequent tabs that we have at the top here. In my case, the only one I have is Tutorial. Underneath Tutorial here, I have the word Assemb. Assemb is short for assembly. So I'm going to left click on that and hit OK. Now, I don't need to pick a plane or anything to start from. What it's going to do, it's going to automatically prompt me to open up a part to bring in for the assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and, in my case, I added a new folder the other day into my CAD folder in last class. I called one Assemblies. And inside that Assemblies folder, I went ahead and put all my parts from the 4-bar assembly. Now, if you want to get very specific, you could create folders for each of the assemblies to keep yourself better organized. In my case here, I'm going to start off by clicking on the 4-bar assembly and saying Open. Now, around my cursor, you're going to see the 4-bar base show up. Anywhere towards the middle of the screen, as soon as you get it kind of in place, left-click your mouse button. So now I've placed my first part. I'm going to kind of back it up a little bit, my center roller of the mouse here. Now, I need to add in the additional parts here. So to do that, I need to go up here to the top. And because I'm in assembly, I've got this new tab called Assembly. Under that tab, I need to go to where it says Insert Components. This is telling the computer basically to bring in more parts. When I left click on that, it's going to go right back to where we started from on the last step. Now what I'm going to do is bring in my long bar, open, put that over here to the left, Assembly tab, Insert Components, short bar, open, bring that over here to the right, Assembly tab, Insert Components. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my connector, open, put that kind of above these, that's fine there. And then I'm going to finish off with Insert Components, wood block, open, and then kind of stack that at the very top. Now obviously this is not the way the assembly is supposed to look, so now what we have to do is start putting together. If you recall from 8C, we have a new tool on our Assembly tab that allows us to do this. That is called the Mate tool. It looks like a paper clip up here in the upper left corner. I am now going to turn that Mate tool on. Now, what I need to do is I'm going to use my middle mouse button a lot to rotate my parts around. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to take the inside of this hole here, and I would like it to mate to the outside of this peg here, because the long bar is going to go on this short side here. So what I'm going to do is with my mate tool on and active, I'm going to hit the inside of this hole right here. And I'm going to hit the outside of this face of the peg here. And what SolidWorks is going to do, it's going to line them up with a concentric mate. Remember, concentric means they're sharing the same center. Now, with that in place, I'm just going to hit my check mark. Now, this is really important to understand. If you go back and look at the drawing, I'm going to blow up on the top view here. You will notice what I'm doing right now. Here's my bar. My long bar is right here. If you look carefully, there is a small gap right here. I'm not going to put my long bar right up against the block. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it sit flush with the peg. This is really important because we want to make sure we have gaps for everything, because in the end, when you're looking at this part, it's going to rotate. We want to minimize friction so nothing burns up. So in this case, I'm going to go back into SolidWorks. I'm going to finish this mate by taking the face right here of my long bar and making it flush with the face of the peg. And hit your check mark. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see there's a small gap right there. In addition, this part is able to move. I'm just grabbing my mouse and moving it around. I'm just going to pull it straight up. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side with the short bar. I'm going to take the inside of this hole, same exact concept, to the outside of that peg. Hit my check mark. Just like we did over here, I'm going to take the face of this short bar and the face of this peg and add a coincident mate there. Hit my check mark. And again, just to show this, there is that gap I'm talking about. It's important to have it. If you don't have it, it will be marked wrong. Now, if you're looking at this from this perspective, again, this can freely move. Now, what I want to do next is I'm going to take my connector and put these two pegs into these two holes. Same exact concept we just did with the short and long bar. With my mate tool still active, I'm going to take the outside of that peg right here on the connector, and I'm going to match it up to the inside of this short bar hole. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go to the peg outside edge and the inside of this hole. Now again, I want to make sure there's a gap here. So the last step for this is then to take this face here of my long bar or short bar, does not matter, and the face of this peg and make them coincident. If you've done that correctly, you should now see a small gap between the connector and the bar. Now I'm going to go to my isometric view so you can see this. It does not matter what way this looks. These do not have to be perfectly straight up. You can have them back. It's okay. I'm just going to move it. But if you look, basically this is what you're getting. I know. What is this device? It's like a toy. Okay. If you start to move this stuff around, you can see it kind of gets a little wacky if I start to really drag it around. So usually you drag it over this one here. Oops. Let me close that out on my mate. And you can see basically it'd be like a little bucking bronco. Okay. You can actually animate this. In one of these classes, we'll go back through this after the semester, and I'll show you how you can put, quote, a virtual motor on this and make it spin around. Now, the last step we have to do is get the wood block on top. So going back to my assembly tab, turning on my mate tool, I'm going to go ahead and start getting some things taken care of here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the bottom face of, whoops, let me clear this out. Sorry, I got that screwed up, and undo that. I'm going to take the bottom face of my block, and I'm going to hit the top face of this piece right here. Now, you can move it around. And honestly, in this drawing, if you go back and look, all I did was just take my block, and I kind of eyeballed the middle and slid it on there. You are more than welcome to do that because we're just going to place the block on there. It does not have to be specifically in the middle, but what I do want to make sure is that it is straight. So I will add one more little relationship so I can keep the block from being twisted. I'm going to take the the right side face here and this face here and add a parallel. And what that will do is it'll keep the block always square to this edge. And that's what I want to make sure happens. So now if you want to adjust a little bit more, maybe you can rotate around. I may pull this over just a little bit. This kind of eyeball, I think that looks pretty good right there. If yours is a little bit further forward, that's fine. As long as you have the blocks sitting on this plate, I like it. Okay. Turn off my mate tool, spacebar, isometric. At this point, I have my finished product done. This is what the final product will look like. So what I want to do quickly is do a file save as, rebuild and save document. Always if it asks that, say yes, rebuild and save the document. Now I want to make sure it's in my CAD assemblies folder with my other parts. They need to be related to each other. So I need everything to be in the same folder, including the drawings. So I'm going to call this 4-bar assembly. Caps lock, underscore your last name. Hit enter. Now, at this point, I'd like you to go to your layout, but your evaluate tab, mass properties. I see it weighs 143.05 grams. That's great. At this point, I want you to print your mass properties. Make sure you're printing to the L108 printer. Say OK. Go ahead and go grab your print from the printer. Bring it back to your desk, and when you do, go ahead and close out the mass properties window. Now, our next step is we need to take and explode our view. So if you look, we have this one over here to the right completed, but now I need to create this one to the left, just like we did in 8C. You want to show people how the part goes together. So what I'm going to do is go back to SolidWorks and work back to my Assembly tab. And if you look to the very far right of the Assembly tab, you're going to see something called Exploded View. If you left click on that, nothing's going to happen. It's waiting for you to make some choices here and to make some moves. Now again, I'm going to basically reverse engineer this. I'm going to do the opposite of what I just put together. So I'm going to start with the block. I'm going to pull the block straight up. Hit done. I'm going to hit the block here too, and I'm actually going to pull it to the right a little bit. And the reason being is when I hit done here, this one here, I am going to pull out into the right. Now I'm going to kind of look at this for a second. I'm rotating this. That looks pretty good. I think it looks lined up. I just want to keep this block in relation to this so it looks correct. Now I'm looking at this. That looks fine. Spacebar isometric again. And actually I'll pull this out a little bit further. And then I'm going to come in here and hit set done. And I'm going to click on my 2 bars. I want both of them highlighted. And now I'm going to pull these out about halfway and hit done. Now I think I'm going to come back to the wood step 1. I'm going to go ahead and click on it over here in this little tree. I'm going to bring this down a little bit tighter. And then I'm going to go to exploded step 2. And I think I need to pull this over just a little bit more so it's lined up with that base pretty good. And at that point, that looks pretty good. If I go to my isometric view, to me, this shows me exactly how this thing goes together. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of my exploded view, hit my save button, not save as. You're saving the exploded view with the regular view. They're just 2 files under the same name. So at this point, we are done with our entire assembly and exploded view. We can now put together our drawing. So looking over here at the size, this is a B border. It is a metric unit, so we are going to use a GHSB metric. So I'm going to go ahead and go to SolidWorks. I'm going to go ahead now and do a file new. Now for my tutorial, I'll go back to my SolidWorks tab. And now I'm going to click on the GHSB metric right here. Do not click the one without the border. You want one with the border. I'm going to say OK. F key to center up. I'm going to double click my 4-bar assembly I see in the open documents. And now what I want to set up is a couple different things. First, I do not want to start with show an exploded model break state. So I'm going to unclick that. I'm going to start with the front view, start with a preview, start with some hidden lines on. And the scale I want for this, looking at this drawing, is 1 to 2. So instead of 1 to 5, use custom scale, 1 to 2. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and start placing my parts. I'm going to start here in the left corner. There's step 1, our front view, top view, right side view, isometric. Hit your check mark. Now I'm going to move my isometric down over here to the right so I can put my exploded over here. So I'm going to grab my isometric and pull it right about there. But then I'm also going to go ahead and add some color to it. If you want to make it so there's no black lines, go ahead and hit the last blue box. Then just double check that you have no black lines on this. I have 4. I'm going to hit delete. So there is my view setup. Excuse me. Now, I need to bring in one more view. I need to bring the exploded view somewhere up in this range right here. I'm going to go ahead and slide some of this stuff over to give myself a little bit more workspace. So to get a new view in here, I'm going to go to my View Layout tab. I'm going to hit the word Model View. And again, it takes me back to the beginning of where we just set our drawing up. I see my 4-bar assembly on the inside. I'm going to double click. But this time, I do want to show this in exploded or model break state. So I'm going to make sure that box is checked on and that I have exploded view here. I want an isometric view, and I'm going to go ahead and do this in color and at a scale of 1 to 2. As you can see, it's way too small on the screen. So I'm going to go 1 to 2. I'm going to drag this up towards this middle right here and left click. Fine tune adjust it. I may bring this over and bring this down a little bit, give myself a little bit more space because I don't have to put any dimensions on anything, so it makes it really easy. So now there is my exploded view. Now again, I just want to make sure there's no black lines. I see a couple right there, or at least one, so I'm going to get rid of that. And at this point, I have all my views in their correct location. So now what I'm going to do is start adding my notes. And I'm going to go ahead and use that trick we've been using in class, which is go ahead and highlight the note right here. Do a Control-C to copy. Go back over to my SolidWorks drawing. Go to my Annotation Toolbar and turn on my Note tool. I'm going to drop the note right below the 4-bar assembly and do a Control-V. Now again, I'm going to highlight this because I want this to be centered. I'm going to highlight the top line because I want it to also be bold and underlined. Click outside of it and hit Escape. There is the title for this. Okay, now this is where you're going to actually put in the number. I think it was 14306, something of that nature. Look at, oops, Control-Z. Sorry, nope. Double click and highlight this. You will need to make sure you look at whatever it says on your mass property sheet. Do not copy the 14306 because I'm not sure. I'm guessing on that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add the title for this side. So again, I'm going to go over and play the trick of highlighting this title right here. Control copy, Control C. Come back to my SolidWorks drawing, Annotation Toolbar, and my Note tool. Drop the note below and do a Control V. Center, highlight, underline. Click outside of it and hit Escape. So now I have my 2 titles taken care of. The next thing I need to add is the bill of materials in the corner. Okay, and remember, talking in 8C, the bill of materials is nothing more than a recipe card. Basically, it's telling you the order I brought the parts in. For instance, when I built this answer key, the first part I brought in was the 4-bar base. The second part I brought in was the long bar. The third part was the short bar. The fourth part was the connector, and then the final part I brought in was the wood block. The 4 bars made of cedar, long bar of 6061 aluminum alloy, same with the short bar. Connector is a cast alloy steel with the wood block being pine. There's one of each component in here. This is all this tells me. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to go ahead now and get this bill of materials added into my drawing. So to do a bill of materials, I need to go back to my View Layout tab, your Annotation tab. And at the very far end, you're going to see where it says Tables. Left click the down arrow and go to Bill of Materials. Now it says select a drawing view to specify the model for creating a bill of materials. I would like you to click anywhere inside this isometric assembled view. left click. Now, since you've already set this up before, it should automatically come up with parts only checked on. If it is not showing as checked on, please make sure that this bubble is filled in. As soon as you have that bubble filled in, hit your green check mark and drag your box over here. Left click and let go. Now, don't panic on the size. The size is fine because we're gonna adjust that right now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my last name and the period on here. So I'm going to double click inside here. I'm going to tell it to keep the link, and I'm just going to highlight Combs 2A and delete it off. I'm going to do that to each box. Keep link. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm just trying to create some space so I can shrink the box down. It'll make sense in a moment why I'm getting rid of this. I know it may seem silly that we save the parts all that way. Whatever way you save them is the way they come in. I'm going to do a keep link again. Keep link. And then I'm going to go ahead and start kind of pulling things a little bit tighter. So I'm going to grab this little bar here with a left click and hold. Bring it a little bit tighter. Bring in my part a little bit tighter. I'm also going to shrink this up a little bit. I'm just going to kind of double click on each one of these lines. Double click, double click, double click, and double click. Now I can come in here and put my descriptions in. Then I'll adjust this. I'm also going to go ahead and shrink down my quantity a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. That allows me to grab this little X in the corner and left click and drag this down here. So now you're starting to see it a little bit smaller. And now what I'm going to do is add in cedar, the 6061 aluminum alloy, and so forth in the description box. So I'm going to double click inside the box, keep link, caps lock on, cedar. Double click, keep link, 6061 aluminum alloy. And I'm going to highlight this for a second and do a control copy. I'm going to double click inside here and keep link, and then do a control V. Double click the next box. This one is going to be a cast alloy steel. And the wood block is going to be keep link pine. Now I'm going to grab this right here and shrink this down a little bit, make my box a little bit smaller. And that looks good right there. So now what I'm going to do is just adjust where I put this, kind of over here underneath the part. And now it fits neatly within this area here. I want you to make sure every time you adjust your boxes so they fit correctly within this area. I don't want them dragging to your title block or hanging over parts. That is imperative. Okay. Now, at this point, my bill of materials is done. The only thing I have left to do is add in what are called balloons. Now remember, the balloons identify the parts that are identified in this table. So for instance, balloon number 1 is pointing to the base. Well, that number 1 here matches this number 1 here. The big thing I want you to hear again, I'm going to say this on probably the next several videos, is do not for any reason change the order of these numbers. If you've put yours together differently than mine, I don't care. What I want to make sure is that these balloons here match the number in the box. That's all I'm looking for. So for instance, if you brought your connector in first and it says 1 connector, leave it. That means I'm going to see a 1 instead of a 4 here. It's okay. It's 100% to me. So don't change things. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and add these balloons on, and then we'll go ahead and get our tile block and finish this part up. So I'll go back to here. Now, balloons are under my annotation toolbar, right in the middle. If you left click on this, the default is circular and 2 characters. That is what I want it to stay as. And then all I have to do is come back to each part, left click on the part I'm identifying, pull the balloon out a little bit, left click number 2. I'll go over here to this part here, pull out to the left, left click. Hit this side over here, pull out, left click, pick on the block, left click, and left click. Now I'm still active, so to get out of this, I'm going to hit escape. And at this point, all my numbers are there. And I'm just going to double check everything matches up. So number 1 is matching to number 1 here, 4-bar base. Number 2 is pointing to the long bar. Number 2 is the long bar. Number 3 is pointing to the short bar. Number 3 is the short bar. Number 4 is pointing to the connector. Number 4 down here is the connector. Number 5 is the block. Number 5 down here is the block. Everything matches. As long as they match, you've got a perfect score. Congratulations. Now, let's get our title block done. I know this one says this is page 3 of 4. Remember, in the last video, I went through and corrected all that. We are going to make this page 1 of 4. This should always be your cover sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and make this page 1 of 4. So I'm going to go into here, and then 1 is already there. I'm just going to double click this and make this page 1 of 4. We're going to make the scale 1 to 2. Drawn by your first initial last name. Today's date. I'll do this 19. Period. And check by. Please change the name. This really no longer works here. And then we're going to add our title. Don't forget this. Don't leave it at place title here. And the title today is this going to be 4-bar assembly. So I'm going to double click on the title. 4-bar assembly. Hit my F key to center it up. Go ahead and hit a file save. Save all. Go ahead and keep it in my assemblies folder with everything else and just hit save again. At this point, you're ready to print. So I'm going to go up and do a file print. Make sure I'm printing to the L108 computer at 11 by 17, which it should be defaulted to, and say OK. Now at this point, go ahead and collect your drawing from the printer. Take your mass property sheet and staple it to the back side of this on the upper left corner here. Fold your 11 by 17 paper in half and put it in the collection box. And at this point, you are done with the 4-bar assembly. The next assembly I'd like you to start working on is the grinder assembly. And we'll help each other out. Good job. That's all I have.